Hey, it's Travis. Too many camp directors run just on gut feel. Our free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic is your dashboard for resilience. Take it today at camp.mba/Travis. Again, that's camp.mba/Travis.
Welcome to the pudding.
The sweet proof of research to back up what you already know about summer camp.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mandi Baker. My pronouns are she, her.
And I am Travis Allison from Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are he and him. Today we're going to think about what it means to prove what camp is. And so Mandi and I are going to spend time in this show thinking about the things that camp people know in their hearts. And Mandi is going to give us the insight as to what parts of that have been proven by research. And really, so much of it, Mandi, has been proven by research, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different corners of the research world that have looked at camp, have looked at it in fascinating and interesting ways. And we hear all the time from industry folks that they're looking for that proof, that backup. I don't know if that's a search for confidence or whether sometimes, one of the things research does well is it puts words to things that we kind of know and feel, but we haven't necessarily been able to get the words on it yet. The plan is today to talk about why we've started this podcast and what we're hoping to achieve, what it will look like from week to week, and also to explain to you a little bit more about camp research and what proof is all about.
Absolutely. And I want to say from Go Camp Pro's perspective, the reason why I started talking to Mandi about doing this is, of course, to present the things. And Mandi has a particular interest and experience in having grown up at camp pretty close to where I am now, having a very similar camp experience to my own and Beth's. And we've had such great conversations since we met Mandi a couple of years ago online. And so, Mandi, I am thrilled to have you do this with me. I am super grateful for your expertise. And I have always appreciated your ability to take research, which is incredibly intimidating to me, and put it into words that camp people can understand, which then I hope, for those of you listening or watching on YouTube, I hope that this makes it easy for you to take the things that we know, that research has proven, and to pass that on to parents. Because I know that a major thing for parents is this is a huge investment, both in time and in money. It is great perceived risk, let alone the risky things we do, high ropes and swimming and stuff. It's just sending your kids away to be in the care of somebody else for a period of time. And I hope that camp pros get out of the show the lingo or the shortcuts to translate what we do for parents so they understand what we feel in our hearts.
Absolutely. That was the driving force, that and wanting to use the knowledge that I have the privilege of learning and gathering over years and years and years to help support the industry and in articulating what they're valuable. But sometimes it's like just that boost of, oh yeah, we're getting this right, or we've taken this for granted for a long time. How do I actually put that into words and say, yeah, we're really getting this right? And of course, because of the nature of who we are and our joy for topics that are gnarly and difficult, messy, maybe we're going to prompt a few questions that you can ponder on your own time of, how do we keep improving this thing called camp and delivering in what is a very different context than where camp started about 150 years ago.
Yeah. And I think that's important too. Like, please, if you're listening, get in touch with us. You can filter that through me, Travis at GoCamp.pro, and ask us questions about what research there is. Do we know a study that sort of backs this up? And any topics that you think could be researched about camp or lessons that the world could learn about camp. A lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about this is within Mandi's specialty, sociology and psychology and development. But I've often said that I don't understand why every health inspector, as part of their education, doesn't have to do a study at camp, because it's such an interesting. Anybody who's been at a camp inside Norwalk knows what an interesting study in how diseases work, that little locked up community. We're not going to go there without guests. We may go there, but we've certainly talked about that particular instance on an old Camp Hacker episode. But I want to go to your specialty, Mandi. How did you start to move from being a person who grew up at camp and worked at camp to being basically doctor of camp?
Sure. Look, I think like anybody's journey or path, it's not always self-selected. I think, there's twists and turns in the road and we make the best of what comes at us. So essentially what happened, I was doing a recreation degree at the University of Waterloo in my undergraduate. My goal was to do therapeutic recreation out in community settings, potentially in clinical settings. And I was pretty excited about working with youth. That's what I kind of knew in my early 20s. I wanted to work with youth populations. And once I was done that degree, I had done an honors, and that was specifically around youth at risk and the use of adventure therapy. And I did a very small study at that point. A couple things that I learned was that research wasn't so bad. I could do it, and that like I said, I was very interested in working with youth populations. And shortly after that, I moved to Australia. And Australia does not have, or at that point, did not have therapeutic recreation as a really well understood professional job. So I found myself in aged care, which was not the population I expected me to be in, and was a little bit, more than a little bit disappointed in the philosophies of the time that it was called diversional therapy. Your job was to divert somebody's attention from potentially imminent death or their illness. It just sounded wrong and didn't fit well with what I had been trained to think and do. I was really interested in meaningful living and quality of life. So I did that for a bit, and then I fell back on my good old camp experience and started working in outdoor education. And at the time in Queensland, which is in a warmer state, they had this kind of gig going where you would work for one employer who would farm you out to multiple camps all over the state. And I probably worked at a dozen, maybe 24 different camps with different operators. And when you do something like that, you kind of go, whoa, there's a lot of different ways of doing this, all of which are good and effective. Some of which I certainly bumped into some stuff where I was like, whoa, man, no. I remember actually being sent out to a site that had just had bushfire, and they wanted to send kids up on high ropes after the trees had been burnt. And I was like, nope, not going to do this, guys. This is not safe. So there was a lot of interesting learning, and I was fairly young at the time. I enjoyed the work, but I had a hard time, it was not permanent. It was gig work, and you were all over the place. So then I took up a position in a cancer charity for youth and young adults living with cancer. And we had members that were patients, but also siblings and children of, and we had a category called bereaved. So people who had lost someone to cancer, and just, again, huge learning experience. But one of my observations from that was that the staff that worked in these kinds of charities, they turned over, and they turned over within about 2 years, max 3. It was a really big deal if somebody made it to the 3-year. And my head went, this is not okay to be okay with. Why did we normalize this kind of turnover? And that led me to doing a PhD. So somewhere between the camp and the charity work, I went, wow, I think we're a bit like this in camps in North America. We have seasonal employees come in. They have this abundance of youthful energy. We use it to our best advantages in delivering amazing children's programming. And then the contract ends. These young people go home exhausted, and we're like, well, not my problem anymore. They're not on contract. And so I thought, oh, there's something here. So yeah, off I went, did a PhD, spent the next 7.5 years, part-time, mind you, working away at that PhD, starting a family, running a res college on campus. And here we are, I guess we're almost another 10 years post that. And I've been doing research on camp since. Just love it. It's interesting work.
Thinking about the topics that you and I have discussed, Mandi, getting ready for this, where do you think it's most important that we start our discussions?
Well, I think it's important to kick off with an understanding of what is research and then what is camp research. Let's start with what is research. Research is, most people know how to do it and do it well and do it frequently. It's that idea of being able to collect a lot of information, to analyze it, so to review it and think about it, and then to make a decision, and hopefully a decision with good confidence. Actually, that's the point, is if you have a lot of information and you can look through it, sift through it, make sense out of it, then you can make a decision with confidence moving forward. You can understand the world just a little bit better, and reflect on, and often something that you use as a word is intentional. Making choices and taking actions that are intentional, that are well informed, and that will help, for most of us, better the experience. So I think people get intimidated from the idea of research or of doing research for 2 or 3 reasons. I'm going to throw them out there, be as controversial as I can. The first is that the academy tends to be very exclusive and has been accused of being siloed, and I think that's a reasonable accusation. The academy tends to publish work for itself. It's read by itself. It sort of starts this sort of exclusive cycle. And part of that is the things like paywalls and the costs of going to university, or the costs of accessing journals and that kind of thing. But there's also this exclusivity of language. Now, I call them, with my students, I call them the 12-letter words. I mean, we all know the 4-letter words, but academics have 12-letter words. The words that are so long and so unusual that most everyday people don't understand them. And there's a certain exclusivity of just feeling dumb. If you don't understand what someone's saying, there's a tendency to stay quiet because you don't want to look foolish. And the, academia has a tendency to use a lot of 12-letter words without realizing that people are feeling dumb. So to argue the other side as an academic, the 12-letter words, once you learn the language, actually help with specificity. It keeps things really accurate, really clear. It helps us really pin down a particular idea, to not lump multiple ideas together as if they're all one thing. This happens often with language. This is what stereotypes do, is we meet one person of a particular category, let's say, and then we say, well, all people of that category are like this. And that flattens the experience. It flattens reality. It flattens the possibility of identity for that person, or for people in that who identify in a similar group. Oh. So the 12-letter words are useful, and we use them for that purpose. But I think academics can sometimes get a little too caught up in our world and not realize that there's a need to translate 12-letter words back into the world using, 5 or 6 letters, using everyday language, and making sure that everyone is clear and on the same page about what we're talking about. So, look, I think that's part of what our goal is with this, is to take those 12-letter words and the big ideas and the concepts, the theories, the abstract, the stuff that floats in the ether, that someone like me finds super helpful for understanding the world. And if I can help translate that, then other people might be able to use and find helpful as well. Yeah.
And I'm really interested in that transition, because in my work in doing communications consulting, we talk about metrics all the time and the things that we measure in that work. And I'm trying to get camps to be better at measuring these things. And I think this is all related to why we're here, because it keeps coming back so many times, like, why I know that this works. How do you know that this works? Well, I just know in my heart. Yeah. And I just keep saying, it's not like, people ask me all the time, like, what do I do in this very specific instance? Like, what social media apps do I use? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know your audience. Like, I can't just say. We have to study it to figure out what it is. And I'm curious about, and you're great at this, and this is why we're chatting, but the thing that I always struggle with so much as a practitioner of summer camp is, as a communications person, is like, I know how many people clicked on this link versus how many people looked at it. When we're talking research in camp and outcomes and all those things, it's so gray to me. And it also relies on a lot of self-reporting too, meaning that the child or the staff member has to say, at one point I felt like this, now I felt like this, or no, whatever. But it's up to so much of it's self-reporting. How do we find the research that works?
Wow, that's a tricky question. Look, I think there's lots of different traditions within the research world, and I think most people, because of the way that we teach science in primary and secondary school, most people have what we call the positivist or maybe even humanist approach to research. This is this idea that if this, then that. It's cause and effect kind of research. We also, the kinds of research that people are familiar with is medical research. So it's where you do a pre-test and then an intervention and then a post-test. And again, these kinds of research that have been the ones that we're most familiar with, the most iterated to us over and over and over through our growing up education. This is often held as the golden standard. And this is a bit of a roundabout answer to your question. I'm not sure if I can 100% answer your question, but I guess once we get into tertiary or higher education and we get into grad school levels of research, what we start to find out is there's lots of different ways of asking questions and lots of different ways of answering them. And this is where we start to learn about all these different traditions or philosophies of doing research. So different researchers will approach a question in different ways and quite possibly will get different answers. And that is, at times frustrating for folks that are new to research or coming into research, maybe even coming into your consultancy, is they're coming to you with this idea that they have a question, there's going to be a golden answer.
Right.
Emphasis on or this idea that there's one answer and that it's eluding them and that's what they're going to go find. Now, if you asked a positivist, they would agree with you. There is a golden answer. And to be really fair, if you're a cancer researcher and you're looking at treatments, I want to know that treatment's going to work. I want I want a answer there. Yeah. I don't want this sort of multiplicity of, this could work or not work. That's not going to make me feel great if the medication could work or not work, or there could be side effects. Can we nail that down a little bit? So those kinds of research, which are the ones that I think most people, that mad scientist envisioning kind of idea, that's the one that most people are holding on to. When we start working through social sciences, like you said, sociology and psychology, and there's worlds and worlds and worlds within and beyond these two, there's different traditions and philosophies of finding answers, plural, the multiplicity of, this is, if you're a student out there and you're thinking about this is what your teacher's carrying on about when they talk about ontology and epistemology. They're talking about the question of truth and reality, whether you believe in multiple truths and multiple realities, or a truth and a reality, or some crisscross, if you can imagine them like they intersect. At what point in that? So once we start getting into that path,
I pick up on one thing, just to make sure we clarify those truth and reality. When you're looking at research and you're thinking about truth and reality, I just want to make sure people who are listening are getting what you're saying. You're saying a truth and reality about an instance or a happening or a thing. Like, you're not talking about the many worlds theory or my philosophy of life leads me to my reality and yours does you. You're talking about, we can observe a thing and there can be both a truth about it and a reality about it. And if another person observes it, they could be different.
Correct. And it's also the words epistemology and ontology are talking about your worldview about those two significant life orientations. Yeah. And in my world of research, we declare our position fairly early on in our writing or in our speaking so that people understand the lens. We use that in everyday language, the lens through which I see the world, or what lenses I'm applying to the way that I'm taking this information in. And when we start, that's very philosophical. It's very abstract. People have, struggled to necessarily put words on it. I spent years and years studying, and I still am sitting here going, what do I really think about that? It constantly is evolving as I learn new things. But those two components of your worldview will change the questions you ask and the way that you absorb or take in the information and the kinds of conclusions that you're able to draw from that. So that's when we talk about, that's why I was talking about positivism. That's a one truth, one reality. Maybe people live life differently. Maybe they interpret it differently, but there is a answer. When we start doing more research in the social sciences, you're going to see a lot more standpoints or philosophies of multiple truths or multiple realities as a standpoint, and therefore the questions I ask are going to be different. So here, let me give you an example. Research questions is kind of that's the golden key to unlocking studies. A positive might ask a question like, what is the impact of this intervention? A sociologist like myself might ask the question of, how does this process work? And what effects does it have? So my question is slightly different because I'm trying to understand the social processes, the dynamics involved in a particular time and place, because I know the dynamics are going to change in a different time and place. So to go back to the question that you've been asked, like which social media apps are going to work best for me? Yeah. Well, what you've said back to them, which is what researchers say all the time, wrong question.
Yep.
I appreciate the question. I know that that's the question you want answered, but we have to step back and ask a question before that, which is, you said it, who's your audience? If I understand your audience, then I will have a better answer for you. Whereas if you ask a question like, what social media app, it's so broad and there's so many possibilities in time and space, so many dynamics at play in that process. It doesn't matter what you answer, you're probably going to be wrong. And you're also probably going to be right. You kind of don't have that level of confidence that you're looking for. So when you ask better questions like, who's your audience? Let's profile them. Let's get a snapshot and try to get a good understanding of who they are. Then we can start to answer that better. If we even just took one bit of information, like what generation is your audience, we can answer the app question better. Because if you're my generation, you're probably still talking about Facebook, which is outdated compared to younger generations, So I think that's what good research does, is it asks better and better questions. And the big difference between a researcher and an everyday person trying to make a judgment call, like what fridge should I buy for the money I have available? My job has been to learn about different recipes or formulas for doing research better. So I have lots of tools in my toolbox about what processes to engage in order to answer a particular question better, or to ask better questions to be able to get better answers. And I say better. I mean, when we talked about naming this the pudding, because we love the idea of the proof in the pudding, and I was like, whoa, I struggle with the idea of the proof. Yeah, because this idea that I can potentially help you ask better questions that help you answer those better because of all these different things, methods that I've learned over the years. But I don't necessarily have the answer there, or necessarily believe that there is a singular answer. I think there's multiple answers that is constantly kind of moving in time and space. So sorry that we intimidated y'all with 12-letter words. It makes sense to us and it helps us continue to improve. But yes, there is more and more a push for researchers to take pause and to figure out how we are putting language to what we're doing and sharing it with the world outside of academia. Enough that we're actually starting to talk about metrics and something called metrics, alternative metrics, about our impact. What impact are we truly having? Am I really helping to support and shape and better the industry, the world, the camps that I care so dearly about, that motivated me to do the PhD in the first place? And we're trying to capture that. Again, capturing it with clicks and engagement online as one of our metrics. And just like you, does that actually have impact? Does that shape or change or inspire or motivate? Occasionally I get a few odd emails and I think, okay, yeah, it got out there. Somebody's thinking I did the thing that I wanted to do there. But yeah, we need to take pause and make sure that we're connecting with getting that information back to the folks that actually participated in our studies in the first place.
So what sort of things can people expect us? What are the topics that you want to cover in our discussions in this, our first? We're going to make this a limited series. We'll do 6 or 8 episodes. I don't think we've quite decided. We'll definitely have probably 30 episodes worth of notes.
Yep.
But how are we going to start off? What do you want to do this first little bit, Patch?
Sure. Well, we're going to start taking ourselves back to some of the building blocks of the research that industry's been asking for. Industry, every time I go to a conference or I spend time with camp friends, the conversation is always, how do I show, how do I evidence, how do I demonstrate the benefits of camp? And we've even taken it back a step before that and talked about, we've started pre-recording some of this stuff because we've been pretty excited, and talking about the benefits of just being in nature, that camp benefits, it's like this intrinsic bonus. Okay, well, camps are often in natural settings or focused on nature-based activities. We're going to talk about the benefits of camp and how some researchers are putting words to it, some reports that are available publicly that I don't know that everybody knows enough to dip into, and we'll try to sum that up for folks. But then we're going to start kind of getting off onto some fun and creative tangents about things like camp magic or relationships of power and the dynamics of power within camp relationships and camp spaces. And then from there, I don't know, we're having trouble picking out of that 30. So there's a few other things about camp counselor employability. I know that that's a hot topic in industry at the moment that we really should touch on, and some exciting ideas that are kind of still fresh and bubbling along about mood after people leave camp, this life cycle of mood, affect, of feelings, and how that can wear people out and make them tired, but also outside of the camp season, what happens for some folks. So those are some of the things we're hoping to hit in this kickoff series.
Thank you, Mandi. I want to end us with one thing, just so people get a real perspective on you and your work. You've been amazing at pulling in research from so many different other parts of the discipline studying camp. What for you is your passion for studying? What's the thing that most drives you to do your research?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. I didn't see it coming. Look, ever since I started it, I was genuinely concerned with and have always been really motivated about the health and well-being of the people who work at camp. And that's all sorts of layers of staff, everything from the front level seasonal, young, youthful staff that come in, right to those, what we call lifers. I actually had to have someone point out to me that's also a prison term, and maybe we ought to be careful about calling people lifers. But those that are deeply dedicated and motivated to better camp and camp industry. So it's always, for me, it's always been about employees. It's been about emotional well-being, about emotional burnout, which is very, very common, or brownout. We started talking about it as brownout. You know, the toast is getting brown, but we're not quite burnt, but we just keep going. I'll just keep pushing on. And with that had raised for me a lot of questions about something called discourse. So the kinds of messaging and stories that we tell about camp to ourselves, to others, that reinforce some of these habits that are actually not very healthy or helpful for staff in camp. And also one of my specialties is relations of power. So the power dynamics involved with camps, which also, again, sort of reiterate this, I've got to stick in it and I don't want to look weak and I'm going to keep pushing, when in fact, a moment to breathe is not going to affect anything in any negative way. So that's always been my motivation. I think secretly and quietly, I have 2 kids, and I want to see the world be a better place by the time they get around. And I want to doing the adulting, I want the adult world to be a better place. And I can't think of a better site. That's an academic way of putting it, a better site for positive youth and child development than camp. We will talk about this when we talk about camp magic. There's just something very, very special and very, very unique about this possible developmental space, this time and space for young people. And there's something deep down in me that keeps telling myself, like, if camps can do a good job of growing good people, then the good people will take that into the world. The adulting world will be a better place. Hopefully one that's more kind and that's more gentle, that's more compassionate, that's more sensitive, but also, clever and thoughtful and intentional too. So, I think that's kind of my secret crush, my secret motivation is camps have a significant part to play in making a better world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I will share that my motivation is similar. Beth and I are fairly new grandparents, and exploring what that means to think about a world in which our grandkids are going to live. But also one of the reasons why I enjoy conversations with Mandi so much is I'm always thinking about, how do we save camp people from camp? How do we keep, I'm just stunned every year, the amazing camp directors that just bow out because they have to. I don't blame them for that at all. Yeah. They do have to. But I'm just stunned that their organizations have let them get to the point that that's that bad.
Yeah, and it's normalized. It's totally. It's an industry that just goes, yep.
Right.
They weren't tough enough, or they weren't built for camp. They weren't built for camp. Hang on a second. Maybe it's time to change the way camp's built. And this is what we call discourses. These are the spoken and unspoken messages and assumptions about what camp, quote, is supposed to be, and how we unfortunately let brilliant, wonderful people walk out the door without a second look. There's no sort of like, hey, we don't want you to go. How can we shift and flex this camp environment, these camp discourses, to make sure those folks stay and are well? Don't just stay and use them up, but they stay and they're fueled and they're nurtured and they thrive. I belong to a research center which is about human flourishing. Even the concept of flourishing, we've talked about thriving, but it's time to talk about flourishing. Like, what do we do, and how do we shift the context to allow people to be amazing? And camp, unfortunately, the industry, or not so much the industry, but the discourse, we can unpack that another week, has gotten kind of stuck and hasn't evolved its its system of thinking about what camp is. And we live in a different time. We are in a very different time. So there's some catch up for the camp discourse to make.
Absolutely. Mandi, thank you for doing this with me. I am really excited for this season.
Me too. I'm so stoked. Thank you.
If people want to reach up and follow up with you, again, I'll try to handle, I'll try to funnel the questions towards you, but if people have a follow-up with specifics about things you say, how can they get in touch?
Sure. I have a small camp research consultancy that's called Lamped Research. So my email is getlamped, GETLAMPED @gmail.com, like a light. That's where you can find me.
Great. And again, Travis at gocamp.pro, if you have any questions. Thank you for doing this, Mandi. I'm grateful.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity.
And Camp Pros, if you didn't know, now you know.
Go Camp Pro, way beyond the basics. Hey, it's Travis. Camp directors often tell me they're just too tired to take on anything new. That's exactly why my free Resilient Camp Blueprint Diagnostic exists. It doesn't add work, it shows you progress. Quick, free, repeatable, you'll know if your systems are paying off without the guesswork. Try it today at camp.mba/Travis. That's camp.mba/Travis.